Salud, amigos,
Greetings,
tripulantes de
friends,
nuestra querida,
crew member of our
contaminada
beloved,
y única nave
polluted,
espacial.
and unique
La
spacecraft,
misma que, desde la última vez
which,
que nos vimos por
since
estos
the last
medios, ha
time
dado
we
otra
met,
vuelta sobre su eje
has
imaginario y,
taken
por
another
supuesto,
turn about its
sigue
imaginary
generando
axis,
acontecimientos
and
en
of
pleno
course continues
desarrollo.
creating events in full
Y si no me ven en el
development.
mapa o
If
en
you
contraplano
cannot see
con
me
nuestra
in the
querida y
map
única flotando en el espacio, es
or
porque tenemos
against the
un
Earth floating in
invitado.
space,
Y
is
este es
because
un
we have a
gran
guest,
invitado.
and this is a
Quiero
very
hacerle de
important
alguna manera
guest.
justicia a su
I
currículum.
want to show a
Estamos
little bit of his
hablando
resume.
del general de
We
brigada
are
de
talking
ejército de
about
situación
the
de reserva
Brigadier
activa,
General
Roberto
Roberto
González
Gonzalez
Cárdenas,
Cárdenas,
doctor en seguridad y
who's a
desarrollo
doctor in
de la
security and
nación por
development
la
of the nation
querida UNEFA,
by
Universidad Nacional
UNEFA,
Experimental de las
National
Fuerzas Armadas,
University of the Armed
magíster en
Forces.
ciencia y
He
artes
has also a
militares,
master in science and
magíster
military
en
arts,
gerencia de
as
personal,
well as a master in
diplomado de
personnel
curso superior en
management,
defensa continental,
diplomacy in
diplomado de curso superior
continental
de comando y estado mayor
diplomacy,
número
and
32,
also of the
licenciado en
state number
ciencias y artes
32,
militares, todos los cursos
a Bachelor of
correspondientes de
Arts
la
in
Academia Militar,
Sciences and Military
profesor
Arts,
docente y conferencista por
professor
33 años
and a
en
speaker
universidades
for
nacionales,
33 years in
comandante
national
del
universities,
411 Batallón
commander
José
of
Antonio
Battalion
Anzoátegui,
411
comandante
Jose
de la
Antonio
unidad
Anzoátegui,
fundamental en frontera
commander
año
of the unit in the border
1983, y si seguimos con el
1983,
currículum
and
se
if
nos
we
va el
continue with
programa,
his
mi
resume,
general.
the program will be
Bienvenido.
over. General, welcome. Thank you, Walter.
Cuéntenos,
Now,
¿qué podemos,
tell us,
utilizando este poderoso medio
by
y
using
la
these
enorme audiencia
means
que nos
of
honra,
television and the
utilizar
audience
para
behind us,
describir
what
desde
can
su
we use in
perspectiva
order to
y la
widespread
situación
from
actual y
your
de lo que usted
perspective
quiera
the
hablar?
current situation and what can you speak about today? Well, thank you very much for the invitation to your program, Master Walter. And from the perspective of the current situation, there's many things that we can speak about, and we can spend hours and hours analyzing the development of the events in full development. And based on the show that we had last year, where we showcase the truth about the south of Venezuela, about what is called the amount of strategic minerals in the country of Venezuela. And when you start researching this measure, about the importance of what we have, because many of us cannot even imagine the rest of the things that we have that we don't know, but the United States know about the things that we have. And when reviewing all this information, I found that since 1948, President Truman had already sent researchers to all the raw materials in Venezuela. We found oil, and they already had knowledge about the amount of gold, about diamonds in the south of Venezuela. This can be seen even in certain documents of the CIA. They have been declassified, some of them, and there's little of them that you can gather and analyze. But for 1952, there were already plans to keep on researching and developing a knowledge about Venezuela, about the south of Venezuela particularly. In 1962, there are some reports of the CIA that show the amount of minerals here in Venezuela. Well, there's a mineral called thorium that was very rare at that moment. Yes, they even developed for that moment, for 1965 and until 1969, some reactors of salts, melted salts to be used with thorium as a fuel. But in 1974, when President Caldera, in his first government, started with a program to conquer the South, well, the United States had already progressed with their development of seeing what we were going to do, or what the Venezuelan government wanted to do in the South, particularly in the Amazon region. Nevertheless, there's a document that was declassified too by President Nixon, and Jimmy Carter came after him, and showed the development of nuclear plants in the United States, either with thorium or with mineral salts, or with uranium. They decided to use uranium because it was easier to use it with nuclear rockets, which required reaching uranium in order to develop the whole technology in the 60s, 70s, and 80s they used with their supremacy over the nuclear power, with rockets that had catastrophic conditions when used. But later, I brought a map, maybe we can show it so the audience can see it. This map is of Dossier. I have my note, maybe we can take a look at it. Here, it is on camera 1, you can speak about the map. You can see, and it's marked. You can see the stripes. This map is within the declassified documents of the Central Intelligence Agency. And for the United States, you understand why they say that the Amazon is theirs. Well, it's not theirs, it's ours. But for many years, there's been a policy on appropriating strategic minerals as well as raw materials of the countries. For them, the American continent was supremacy. That was the meaning of it. It was the control of American for Americans, for them, for the Americans in the United States. So after studying and surveying all these documents from the CIA, we find that in this map of Venezuela, they are showing the different sites where thorium has been found, as well as other strategic minerals. Even beyond, they show the oil basins of Venezuela. And in the oil basins, you can see the stripes. This is part of the Barina Basin. And all this amount of energy resources and strategic minerals was already known by the United States. There's a memorandum later on of the White House in January 1982, where through this memorandum of the White Secretary House, the Executive Secretary of Natural Resources and Environment, for Secretary Reagan, he states that the United States import half of the reserve in 22 strategic minerals. The reserve should be enough to supply the military and civilian requirements during the first 3 years of emergency or war. In this memorandum. So, already creating a war like World War II, a long-lasting war. Yes, of course. And they were continuing with the Cold War. And for them, Venezuela, in 1984, out of the 28 minerals that they established as strategic, Venezuela had 17 out of these 28 minerals. Already in this memorandum, written down that Venezuela had 17 of these 28 minerals. The source is a memorandum of December 1983 of the Treasury Department for Strategic Minerals. In 1984, in the Office of Economic Intel and National Council, they state that the United States in Venezuela, the United States, we as the United States, we have in Venezuela aluminum as well as many minerals like magnesium, nickel, tungsten, zinc, copper, graphite, asbestos, and antimonium. Well, it was the time where the oil companies believed that this land was theirs. Yes, as if it was the backyard. If we controlled everything there with our transnational companies, we also have control over some of the politicians. Yes. Now, if we continue with this document, we can find that yearly they issue reports about the situation of the number of strategic minerals in Venezuela and in the south of Venezuela particularly. There's a report of the geological studies of the United States, of the agency in charge of strategic surveys and minerals. There's three parts that call my attention, that state that there's quite a lot of minerals, and there's an important amount of uranium. Uranium can be found in the south of Venezuela. And also rare lands, rare soil. This is the study of 1984. And also diamonds, which is also part of this study. if you see this study, these rare soils are all those minerals that are being used in order to develop state-of-the-art technology. Technology on IT, for space travels, for satellites, and so on and so forth. And we had these minerals in amounts that they have not even been able to quantify. So these are components in order to use for space rockets, right? Yes, of course, and state-of-the-art missiles too. Well, all this brings us to what we said at the beginning when we spoke about thorium at the beginning of last year. The thorium that we can find in the south of Venezuela, well, it's called El Impacto. It's a small mountain. And here, last year, we said that there's enough amount of thorium which is unaccounted for. We cannot calculate the amount. And thorium was something they have already been working with a research about the use of thorium instead of using uranium. Instead of uranium, yes, instead of uranium. Today, China has already developed the technology to work with thorium. India has already developed technology to work with thorium. So there are two countries that have developed a technology to work with thorium and who will develop as a fuel, as a nuclear fuel, which pollutes less and it's also allowed. And based on the estimates of the Agency of Nuclear Analysis of the United States, Venezuela has 1,300,000 tons of thorium for them. It is important to say that there could be more. In the last 50 years, Germany, India, Canada, Japan, Belgium, Russia, Brazil, the UK, and the United States have been researching thorium as a nuclear fuel. However, the table on your left that shows the amount of thorium shows first India. Amongst them we can see India, Japan, China, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Russia, and the United States. Well, what does this mean from the point of view that we have? Stating that we have reserves of strategic minerals. Other than this, they still develop yearly reports more and more today. They do this monthly, yearly, but the declassified reports go up to 2002. We were developing this work with a work group, and in 2007, based on a geological study of the United States, well, it is stated that in Venezuela, we have reserves of uranium of 50,000 tons of uranium. So when you start researching about this and what's the reason behind why Venezuela, it's very clear. It is as clear as it can be. There is no need to go beyond in only to determine and say, okay, here we want Venezuela because since 1947 or 48, we've determined that you have resources, the resources that are enough for the whole world. So when we were young, God was creating the world, but He did not create the world. He just stood in Venezuela and created heaven and earth. The diversity that we have here in Venezuela. We have 4 different regions, 4 fronts. So we have the Caribbean, we have the Atlantic, we have the Amazon, and we have the Andean region. So it's a mega diverse country. We have a great biosphere reserve, we have water, we have a good weather, where the climate goes from the beaches of Caribbean to the snow in the Andes. We can choose whatever we want. Of course, but what does this mean? So God said, okay, I have everything here in Venezuela, and then I will supply it to the rest of the world. So He created the world, but all the research were kept here. So we start reviewing, as of today, with the mining ministry, we were looking at the amount of strategic minerals in Venezuela in order to identify this, and there is an area that the United States has identified, which is the mining arch of Orinoco. And this has a key area for them, which is the area of what is known today as Pijiwao. And this is in the south of Venezuela, to the west of the Amazon state. And all this area here of Pijiwao is extremely rich, and it has been identified by the American government with different departments of research that they analyze about this from the point of view even coming from satellites. And they determine the different amounts of minerals, including thorium, niobium, and there are certain elements that can work together. There's also gold, there's diamonds, there's thorium too. So the amount of minerals is very important here. There's also uranium. So the amount of strategic minerals in this area is very important. And when you review the last threats that have come to Venezuela in the last 5 years, they never expected this. And we said this last year in your own program, that they need to come to Venezuela in order to stop the Bolivarian Revolution. Why do they want to stop the Bolivarian Revolution? Because, let me come again, the Bolivarian Revolution is in this book. This book is called Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Here, everything is here. And it states that all these strategic minerals are of the property of all Venezuelans. And in order to sell all their strategic minerals, they must be sold according to the laws in the Constitution. We cannot just come and decide to do what we want to do. No, we need to open Venezuela to the whole world. But this is a legislation in the Constitution. There's a ruling behind this. And this happened many decades ago, where the oil companies did whatever they want in every oil field, and they just decided it was their backyard. Yes, of course. And they even have their own private police. Yes, and they even used a lot of materials, and the state did not know the amount of material they were taking to the United States. And this happened already with Rockefeller and with Seven Sisters. They knew that oil was in great amounts here in Venezuela, and they just used this as it was their backyard. They still believe this happens. Part of today's problem is that they believe that they need to come back to the 60s and 70s, where they dominated from the south of the Mississippi to Patagonia. And they did this as they liked, with all the invasions that took place during last century, in the midst of the 20th century, in Nicaragua, in Guatemala, in Panama. What happened in Panama was terrible. Yes, in order to capture one person, they killed 5,000 people. Yes, and Chorrillo was the most important historic part of the old Panama. You could see this in postcards, and when you walked around this, you knew the meaning of this. And the land was completely destroyed. There's nothing left of Chorrillo. And the Central Command, where I had an interview before the attack with the leader, was taken away from the map. Everything was destroyed. Yes. And if you see the map of Latin America today, they've recently flooded. We're not speaking 20 years before. No. They're flooding Latin America with military bases. Well, in Colombia, there's 9, right? Yes. They also gave the land, air, and sea space. So they don't have anything else to give the Americans. Yes, it's what we said before about the bases in Puerto Carreño. There's a river base, an air base, and a land base. The same thing happens in San Carlos de Rio Negro, where there's a monument, a huge air base, a strategic one. And also we can find throughout the whole border of Venezuela, there's a given number of bases. And they've reinforced this because the maneuvers that took place in the Amazon River, in a river next to River Amazon, in September, October, were created in order to bring facilities to the operations in the rivers that could take place. Well, this happened with former politician who states that I don't want to talk about, who said, in order to control Venezuela, we must occupy Colombia. And Colombia, as Trader Santander did, decided, yes, come here, do whatever you want. They just dropped their trousers. This is shameful. Of course, there's many different aspects and reasons that from the geopolitical point of view, both from the Colombian area as with the part of Guyana, where the Secretary of the United Nations wants to also go in order to stop with the problem between Venezuela and Guyana. Half of this goes to Guyana, half to Venezuela. But this is not how it should happen. There's an established protocol by the United Nations. Well, you're not Secretary General just because. I was in charge of covering the United Nations for 1/4 century, and there's things you cannot even tell. And the other part is Colombia, where we can see that indeed, as you said before, and you've said it throughout your show, that they, in order to control Venezuela, they must occupy Colombia. So they dropped their trousers in order to allow the Americans to do whatever they want, And this is a matter that clearly explains what the nationalist feeling of Colombia. And they do whatever they want, whatever a soldier of the United States do. We know that they love liquor, they love drugs. They did this in Japan. And this is a hypothetical case. May God forbid. Even if they rape the daughter of the president, they cannot send this person to jail. What is sovereignty if this is what happens? Bolivar would be fuming. Well, here we have a dossier about the matters that have taken place in the use of the Venezuelan territory by the United States, and there's very little. The mission of March 2015 by Barack Obama was an extraordinary threat, and this does not come from free. An extraordinary threat, you know, as a soldier, as a member of the military, is a phrase, a code phrase that states if we declare something as a threat, we can justify war. Invade and destroy. Invade and destroy. This is what it means. Of course, Obama was not going to do so. Just set the stone or open the door for the invasion and destruction of Venezuela. This is what they've done with Venezuela. They want to do so. And the strategy of the South Command as defined in the document, and we spoke about this last year, about the Balboa Plan, the Freedom One. Please remind us of Balboa Plan. Balboa Plan was a plan that the United States had already realized that President Chavez was going to be the president. So they developed a plan for Chavez not to be a president and to do so via a coup d'etat and not legally and constitutionally take over the power as a constitutional president. And they created a plan in 1997. The plan was created in some schools, and the plan that was built in some schools in Europe by NATO. Then they tried to implement in 1998, and the elections of December, Chavez won the elections. He started working in office in February 1999, and then the plan was applied in 2002 with the coup d'etat. Who was in charge of the coup d'etat? The generals, of course, without troops, with nothing. They just had a general, and if you are to review the names of the 100 generals that participated in this assault to the power of President Chavez. They wanted to get rid of this constitution. That is what they wanted to do. They did not use any constitutional authority. And what they did, well, the nation itself, the people with the mid-rank commanders and the current defense minister, Vladimir Pino Lopez, he said, General, what am I doing? Well, work with your unit. Well, my unit is 3 minutes away. I need 1 minute away. And then with the people were able to bring back power on April 13. That was a very famous day, April 13. So, rebuild the Constitution, which was created and chosen, because this is a social contract that must last forever. This is a social contract. But what happens today? After Venezuela Freedom 1 plan, this was created with Venezuela. They dreamed about Venezuela, and of course, Venezuela was the only thing in demand. This was created by Mr. Kelly, who's one of the secretaries of President Trump. He was the commander. Kelly was the commander of the South Command of the United States. But the other person is only thinking about Venezuela, but not only about the country, but when they want to use it directly, and is the commander of the South Command with Venezuela Freedom 2 or Freedom 2 Venezuela. So what happened with all of this? So they just want to take over it. Yes, they want to conquer it basically. With the map that I showed you, they are born by thinking that the Amazon River is theirs, that all this area is theirs. How can they believe this, right? Well, even in, how can the Venezuelans say that it's theirs? Yes, so they even speak about, as in the guidebooks, they speak about an inhabited area that they say is inhabited by people without culture and savages too. They cannot even realize that there's an originary culture there, an ancestral culture, a culture that is the one that belongs to those who take care of the forest, of the jungle, with the Piapoco, with the other tribes, with the other people, the Guaibo, that are farther south, the Warao, there's Piaroba, there's Yanomami. That's a nation, the Yanomami nation. They are small people, 3-4 feet. And these indigenous communities in the Amazon live there throughout the whole Amazon River. And they even populated the jungle, and they help with the communication access, which is the rivers. And the rivers are now more populated, and we started seeing communities that have started using the river for their means of survival. And when you see that these people say the Amazon is ours, well, of course, if you listen this from the moment you're born, they believe that they are the ones who are going to exploit it and manage it. Well, there's different ways of doing so. I remember a commander, and we flew over the deep south, and he told me, when we take the first trip to warn people that we're going to land, of course there was no control tower, you will see that everything that happens in those houses will be closed down, and everything that the American missioners are doing are acting upon. And suddenly you're going to see that everything is closed and disappears. See, you're going to see when we land how they will disappear. And of course they did. And this Christian missions had nothing to do with the Holy Mother, of course. And these people were studying the minerals by telling us this. Yes, the new tribes. And since 1962, in 74, where they decided to chart the areas, when they see where the new tribes were located, they are located in the Amazon and Bolivar provinces. Well, there is supposedly uranium there, this is an element of new tribes. And you ask them, what are the new tribes doing here? Well, we are bringing the religion to the indigenous population of Venezuela. No, they're not doing so. They're taking uranium or they're surveying the lands. And we can find this, and we've seen this happening in many, many places, from north to the south, even in the Andean region, in a national park, which is in the last part of Venezuela, in the border with Brazil. Because in the national park of Parima, where we have Yanomami people, there are different tribes. And with my commander, he was the person who took out the tribes from this area. But today, remember that I spoke about the Fourth Republic there. I saw what you were saying. They listened to the plane, and they disappeared and hid everything. Here, for today, I brought this. Before continuing with this, let me show you. This is the training course command of 1957. Well, there was General Marco, and they did not like him because he liked to say the things as they were real. Well, this is the report. It was given to me of the command course of the state of 1957 of the trip that was taken throughout Venezuela to study, and they went there. There's a study on the Bolivar state. They did not reach the state of Amazonas yet because it was a virgin area yet. So there, they even have information about energy. And here, do you want to show this? Yes, of course. Let's take a look at this with camera 3. And here, there's something that I want to share with you. Here, it is stated, and I will read this to you. If we compare the production pace beforehand, we're speaking about oil. This is the report of 1957. If we compare, because here it is stated that the exploitation is based in barrels. And then there's Creole Oil Company with 1.2 million barrels per day. 1,002,800. So almost 1.25 million. Then Shell, and then other companies. So this is what's happening today. And Exxon is the one hurt by the current situation, by the current state affairs. And the main media about the new way of showing television spoke about Creole Television Corporation presented. This was the official network, and they paid for the whole production of the news, and they managed this. Yes, and there is a web page on the internet. I've used this for a while, for over 10 years, maybe more. It is called It's Secret. It's called Exxon's Secret, and someone showed the information about Exxon's secrets, right? EXXOSECRETT, and you can see the clashes. Well, maybe this person had a reality check and thought about the ethics. Yes, and you can see the connection with the whole world, and they are part of all the institutions in America and the whole world. There's even information about different people who work today in the Department of State of the United States before occupying the position was the president of Exxon. So oil in power, but now with power. If you read this report of 1957, well, with geopolitical power, yes, of course. And here they speak about different companies, as TAS Atlantic, Sinclair, Phillips, as well as others. These are all the companies that extract oil in Venezuela. Here there's some information. This shows that a thermometer, I will speak about this briefly. It is inferred that the global market of oil is a thermometer that registers in one way or another of the geological areas, the deficiencies of different global sources of production. So in the case of an international war, the oil industry of Venezuela will be a highly profitable goal for aerial attacks. So, militarily, this is a very profitable target. Yes, of course, of course. So with this, we know what happened, and here we have more information that state that this is part of the 50-50 law of Mr. Guerrita when he was president for the oil companies in charge of the refineries, of the pipelines, of the all the information that is showed in this report by the Superior School of the Armed Forces back then. And back to this, the statements of Mr. Trump last year on August 17, who threatened us with a military intervention. Please go back to this, slower. Last year, President Trump on August 2017 threatened us with a military intervention. Yes. But my thesis is that Trump, billionaire, who's done whatever he wanted to do with everything, and the only thing he wanted to do was become a president. He bought the advisors. I've studied the lobbyists in the Fletcher School of Lobby and Public Diplomacy, the School of the Kennedys. I had the honor and pleasure of studying there, and we studied all the different lobbies. The lobbies that we could not find were the pro-Israeli and the military lobby for technology, but the management of the lobby that this guy does was the one that led him to presidency. But now he said, beyond president, I'm also the commander-in-chief. And for me, this sinister character wants to be a commander-in-chief, and he wants his own war. Sure, of course. Why? If Obama did so, and the one before him did so, Bush, both senior and junior, why I'm not going to do so? But Junior, who did not want to go to Vietnam, his father had a problem with the Navy because he used a parachute, and well, there was no ejection in the jets, and there was the ghost that two of the crew members died in the plane. He said, jump, they did not answer, and he lived with this. But his son said, I also want to be an aviator like my father. But he said, no, there's wars among us. I will only work in the Aerial Reserve. Well, and the celebration of the South American Conference with the military chiefs of the different countries of, including Colombia? Yes. Colombia, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Peru, Uruguay, and the United States. They are trying to create a multilateral force for the intervention of Venezuela. Well, because it looks better like that, right? Yes, the execution of the military treaties with Venezuela with the participation of NATO units, reinforcing different bases of Leticia and Itay. And for those who do not understand where these bases are, maybe we can see these. There is a laser. Director, please take a look at this. Here we have Bichada and Leticia. All this area surrounding Venezuela, they already prepared the operations to, on the one hand, lock the military units, and on the other hand, advance. Based on the map that we just showed, there are 7 areas that they want to intervene with the operations in the rivers. There's no other ways. In Puerto Carreño, and in order to get to Puerto Páez, there's no possibility of creating a bridge. They need to cross with donkeys or with rivers, so it's difficult. So they have to do this with Chelan. Well, they learned something when they lost in Vietnam, right? Of course. And there's increased military activity in Colombia, in the border with Venezuela, in the northwest and northeast of the Táchira state. This is a warm zone, and there are military exercises carried out jointly in the New Horizon maneuvers of January to July 2018, where many members of the military unit of the aerial component reached Venezuela. All of them were armed. And they want to do this in Mexico and other countries where Venezuela is at the core of the discussion of all this visit. The statement of the Secretary of the Interior in order to have an oil embargo on Venezuela. And President Maduro said, well, there are many countries in the world who want to buy oil from Venezuela, so we can choose. I believe that we are facing a situation which is worse than it may seem, and the plans are already set. The political and diplomatic cause might be the only reason why it has not started. Well, with a reason like this and with the brothers that we have, well, Kane seems to be a dumb person when taking a look at them. Well, Walter, the plans are already there, and they have created these plans since 1997 with the Balboa plan, then with the rest of the alternative plans, Freedom 1, Freedom 2, and some other names that will be given to the next plans. I will answer as Commander Chavez said in a TV program. Shall they not be mistaken? This is a peaceful revolution, but we are also armed. If they attempt to enter Venezuela, Venezuela will retaliate with force, and even against the Colombian people. The war will reach Colombia too. So this is the order of the ideas. So when you take a look at all the statements of the military drills, all these approaches of reasons that lead us to believe that we are preparing ourselves for intervention, right? A big scale. This is not a small operation. A lovely short war. A lovely short war. Short and lovely. Intense but short. Lovely short war. Well, a lovely short war. For all Venezuelans watching us, we cannot have more evidence about what's happened after we see what's happening in Syria. It's short. They come in and then they leave. And they leave everything destroyed behind them. There we have Libya, divided. There's many areas divided. Then Iraq. Listen, I left the Libyan government of Gaddafi. I was invited to dinner with beautiful carpet surrounding the palace. There was a carpet of Ricardo Alarcón de Quesada, a high commander of Cuba, and he said, as you are landmarkers, we're going to be near Colonel Gaddafi with a translator in order to understand, and I had freedom of action in Libya, and it worked like clockwork with an excellent education system, excellent medicine, everything free, everything from the state, because the oil was reinvested in the social area. Gaddafi had training in the most important military academies of Europe. The same thing happened with Saddam Hussein. They had the different people, the Sunnis, the Shiites, and the Kurds, all in peace, and the Kurds had their own legislation, their own means of communication, their own language, and suddenly everything led up for them to become rebels, changing all the map in the Middle East with Israelis as a joint member of the United States in order to have control of this. Well, Israel is something that's beyond what we can see in the map. I spoke about this in the Jerusalem University, and a young person just stood up and said, I agree with the Venezuelan person. And someone asked him, what are you doing? Well, because you came from Europe. I was born here, and the young people are the ones who will die due to you, the old people. I was never again invited, I agree with this. Well, you've spoken about this, and you're showing all the events in the Middle East. And recently it has been stated that Palestine, all this area surrounding Palestine, will not be inhabited for a given time due to the amount of pollution and contamination of all the bombs, all the contamination due to these because of the United States. When the War of the Desert, where they changed and placed uranium of their grenades, well, because the story behind this was that uranium is so dense that mass time acceleration has a great impact and will open any type of vehicles, but they forgot that the impact of this erases uranium, and instead of using uranium, they decided to create the different projectiles. Yes, of course, we see now Iraq completely polluted everywhere, with also diseases that never existed before. We can see this today, we can witness this today. Yes, and this is what will happen in Syria too, and it's also going to happen in Palestine. It's been already stated by the United Nations. Now, when people say, from time to time, you start speaking and remembering what Chavez said, today there's a nation. And yes, well, there's no such thing, but we have a nation. But they forget that this nation is me, nation is you. We're all a nation. It is either your heart or your guts. Yes, it's either your heart or your wallet, your dignity or the state. So what are the Americans looking for? There are important points here that I did not speak about previously. And this happened during this week based on the social networks where it was stated that there was a disaster with the stocks, and the only two stocks that did not have a hit were the Moscow and Shanghai stocks. And why did this happen? Well, because the geopolitical axis is now headed towards the Middle East, and someone, Putin, will of course know what to do. But they did not say that the main loser in this dropping over 1,000 points was ExxonMobil, Johnson & Johnson, and the Pfizer. They did not speak about this. That are the reasons why they are desperate. We know that the dollar went down due to these, and the president of OPEC said, okay, let's see how we can manage this, because the value of the dollar came down. So what are we going to work with? Well, there's Petro today. Well, and after all this situation, well, the dollar is a problem, right? Yes, of course. Well, there's a machine that they use in order to create dollars with no backup. Now, Venezuela. We are under difficult moments. Why? Because they said, okay, we're not able to destruct the state, and the state was strengthened. The state with the government, with all the public governments, with the Constituent Assembly, and also by electing the governors. Former President Carter, he was shown here, and he said, we've reviewed elections throughout the world. I don't remember how many countries he spoke about, maybe 65 countries, maybe 65 electoral processes. And he said this, and I can quote this, we show this here. The best electoral system of the world is the electoral system of Venezuela. President Carter. Well, and today, as they were not able to destroy the state, they want to destroy the nation. What's a nation? Territory, population, culture. I cannot take houses away from all the people and take land. I need to destroy the culture in order to continue with the invasion process, with a so-called invasion with humanitarian rights. Of course, they will not invade as they did before. But when you see what they are destroying, it's part of the culture and part of our identity. What do I mean by this? Well, I'm talking about a currency. They try to destroy a currency, and we've seen what has happened in the border. They are creating their portfolio with the notes of Venezuela. I know that we do not have enough time, Walter. Yes, we are about to conclude the program. But what can I tell my people, those who are watching us today? Listen, we have a democratic government that is working with the Constitution. We're calling for elections. But we are facing an attack against our state nation. We knew that this group of Venezuelans who were going to the Dominican Republic were not going there to sign any agreement. No, 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 no. This was just a mask. They were only following orders of their bosses. These people were not signing any agreement. So what do we have to do to demonstrate nationally and to the world that we are going to vote for this constitution, for our people, for our fathers, for our brothers, for our children, for our grandchildren. And this is my goal, for all of us to have a clear conscience in the future. I did not contribute for Venezuela to be destroyed, because the United States are behind this. They want to get our riches, our wealth, and particularly the oil companies. They don't care about the inhabitants of this holy land. Sadly, this is what happens. And the armed forces, when they cross the borders, provided freedom to 5 nations, including the nation of the traitor Santander. And we have 5.6 Colombians living here in Venezuela. Why? Why then? Well, many of the people from Colombia are not leaving Venezuela. Not even the ones who came after President Jimenez. No. They're not leaving Venezuela. This is the best land in the world. It's the best country in the world. When you talk about soil, when you talk about people, when you talk about biodiversity, we talk about the forefront that we have. And it's a beautiful piece of land. And with all of this, you can see that we have oil, we have fuel. It is cheaper to fill my gas tank in my car than to buy a glass of water. So this is part of this. I am very proud of having you here and also seeing the jacket. If I knew that you were going to wear the jacket, I was going to wear it. Well, my first title of professor was provided by that school, that old school. When I came here to speak about the conflicts, and UNEFA gave me the title of professor and doctor. And I believe that this is the type of university where you do not waste your time and things happen there. It's been a pleasure having you here. The program, wherever you may be on the other side of the monitor. Thank you very much for allowing us to be there with you. Think about what you've listened today, because this is only a small part of what we need to face daily and part of the historic event in full development. Whether we like it or not, we are protagonists. From Studio 3 of Venezuela Televisión, the pioneering network of Venezuelan TV, this was Walter Martinez, host and producer of Dossier, main program of the Southern Hemisphere of international information via satellite. Director, the floor is all yours.